City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the theater. This seminar, playwright, director, choreographer.
A warm welcome to the American Theater Wing's Working in the Theater Seminars, now in their 25th year and coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. These seminars offer a rare opportunity to explore with the panelists the realities of working in the theater. Today's seminar is devoted to playwrights, directors, and choreographers. We will learn something about how they became professionals, their work ethic, and their reasons for being in the theater. We hope that you will enjoy and learn from today's experience. I'm Isabel Stevenson, Chairwoman of the Board of Directors of the American Theater Wing. And now, let me introduce our moderators for this seminar. First, a distinguished member of the theatrical community, Pia Lindstrom, who is a director, an author, and a critic. And George White, who is director. Are you CEO or are you chairman of the board? George White, chairman of the board of the Eugene O'Neill Foundation and a member of the advisory board of the American Theater Wing. George, would you please start the whole bit right now and go through everything that we have to know?
Thank you, Isabel. On my far right is playwright, director, choreographer, also contains lanolin, Chris Durang, who was last represented on Broadway with his play Sex and Longing with Sigourney Weaver, and is coming in with a new play shortly off Broadway with the intriguing title of Betty's Summer Vacation, which has a lot of resonance. To my immediate right is the Tony Award-winning director of the Beauty Queen of Leenane, I found that it was called today, Garry Hynes. Welcome.
Thank you.
And on my left, I have a dual personality right here. This is Michael Chepiga. He is both a lawyer and a playwright. He's represented now on Broadway with Getting and Spending. It's his first Broadway play, not his first play, but his first play on Broadway. Next to him is Graciela Daniele, who is the fabulous choreographer. She has done Ragtime, of course, we know about that. She's now preparing Annie Get Your Gun. She is a 9-time Tony nominee, a 6-time Drama Desk nominee. She won the Fosse Award, and she's about to get the George Abbott Award. So she knows a lot. And next to her, we have Joe Mantello. He knows a lot, too, about acting and directing. Corpus Christi is the play he's just directed, which was a very exciting experience I'm sure he's going to tell us about. He directed Love, Valor, and Compassion. As an actor, he was in Angels in America, and he got a Tony nomination for that. He is no stranger to controversy. So, with that, Joe, what does all the protest that surrounds a play that might be happening out in the street due to the creative process inside the theater?
Well, we tried very hard while working on this play to keep our focus on the play itself and to not respond in any way to the controversy, since I think we had very little to do with the creation of it. It's very difficult, you know. This thing sort of blew up in the middle of our working on this play together, and Terrence McNally and I sat down and said, okay, the play needs work. We have to cut. There's rewrites. We're still shaping it. Let's make a promise to each other that we will not answer any of the criticism or answer any of the controversy while we're working on the play. We will try to make the play the best play that it can possibly be, and that's our only obligation. I don't know, it's sort of a no-win situation, and I think that we did our best to sort of block it out. Manhattan Theater Club was really supportive. They kept us. It was actually a fairly normal rehearsal process, other than the bomb dogs.
The metal detector that you have to go through to get in.
That was later, yeah. So I'm not... in this instance, it was fairly unremarkable in terms of the rehearsal process. I don't know that I would ever want to go through it again, but...
There was something to me obscene, really obscene, about walking into a theater going through a metal detector.
I can't imagine. I've been in rehearsal or previews now for about 6 weeks, and I have not slept in about 6 weeks. And I can't imagine adding to that the stress and the strain of metal detectors and dogs. I am barely coping with a very uncontroversial play, except maybe till the reviews come out. Very uncontroversial, and it's taking all I can do to deal with it. And I can't imagine adding that on top of it. It's just mind-boggling to me.
What is your play about, other than about 2 hours? I mean,
about 2 hours. I never know how to answer that question, whether to tell the story or what I've finally found out after 6 years of working on it. I could say a couple of things, is that life has to be about more than getting and spending, or that if you believe in God or love somebody, you have to do things you don't want to do. And that's what I'm coming to understand after 6 years of grappling with this material. The story is very simple. It's a woman investment banker who has made $18 million in insider trading and has given all the money away to the poor to build housing for the homeless. She gets caught and is about to go on trial. She wants to get the best defense trial lawyer of her day, a man who has been fed up with it all, with life out here, and has retired to live in a monastery. And she goes down, seeks him out, finds him, and drags him out to defend her. And the story is about the two of them and how they deal with each other, with the situations they find themselves in, with the courts, with the law, with what's right, and with each other.
Are you in this? Did you base it on yourself?
Well, the first day of rehearsal, the play was done at the Old Globe in San Diego, and we met in a rehearsal hall, and everyone, went around the table, made introductions, and the actor said, "I'm so-and-so, I play this part," and we went through all the 7 parts, and then I introduced myself and said, "I'm Michael Chepiga, I think I'm all of you." So, yeah, there's something of me and something of everybody I've ever met in every character in the play, but there's no specific event or no real case or anything. It's all just the product of an aberrant imagination.
Graciela, coming from Argentina, did you have a problem as being were you a dancer first and then worked into choreography? How did you make your mark because that's also a fairly... It's the equivalent, as a director, be a choreographer in a culture like Argentina.
Yes. Well, I left Argentina, as I said, we ran away from Argentina when I was very young. I was about 15, 16 years old. And I didn't come here directly, I went to Europe. I was a ballerina then, I was working mostly in ballet companies. And it was not until, I think it was 1961 or 62, I was living in Paris and working in Paris, and I saw West Side Story. And that, and I'm not the only one, it's that changed the lives of so many people, so many people. I saw that and I thought, I have to go to New York and learn how to do that. I mean, there was something so extraordinary, complete about it, which I did, and I just came here actually to study. I just, got a little money and I came just to study.
How did you learn? Who did you learn from when you came to New York?
I went to study, and I went to Matt Maddox, who was a jazz teacher, the perfect descendant of Jack Cole. So I learned the real thing, And I went, of course, to Martha Graham, and I went to Ballet Theatre. But it didn't last too long. Within a month of being here, Matt Maddox was choreographing a Broadway show called What Makes Some Iran by Bud Schulberg. And he offered me, there was a part for a Spanish-speaking lady, and she had to be a dancer and blah, blah. So that's how I got on Broadway. It was just an accident, and a marvelous accident. I mean, within a month, it's amazing. And so I really started from, being the chorus girl, learning my métier very slowly, and then I was extremely lucky that Michael Bennett chose me as assistant to him. And that's when the creative side started. I did not know that I had it. I had no idea that I could be a choreographer. I still don't know that I could. I think it's an accident. Everything's like, oh my God. I tremble every time I start something, that they're going to find me out. So that was it was a natural progression, and learning from a genius like Bennett, and then I worked with Bob Fosse, and again that I learned so much from him, and then they actually pushed me into choreography, and then from then I started directing. So it's interesting. I always felt like I was kind of a person that is at home. Somebody knocks at the door, they open and say, "You want to come out and play?" And I go, "Yeah, okay." I have no idea why I'm doing it, but it's like it's fun. It's something new that I have to learn. Right now I'm directing and choreographing a revival, Vani Get You Gone. It's the first time that I'm doing a revival. I'm scared because, I don't know if I can do it because I want to bring something new into it. But that's what is exciting about, the theater.
Michael, this is your first play, and
Yes.
when did you first meet your director?
Well, I'm just learning. My first mistake was to let him read the script. Because he's been making me rewrite it ever since. So that was my first one.
Well, track here, in a sense, your career. How did you get going and all this stuff?
Well, my first introduction to professional theater was through you, George, at the O'Neill Playwrights Conference.
That was not a setup.
No, but it was earlier. It's a fact. I was a playwright at the O'Neill National Playwrights Conference in 1978 and again in 1980, and saw how hard it was to be a playwright, and then went to law school afterwards. Took some time. I had always written. I'd written in high school and in college and throughout law school. I left law school and started working at a large firm. Had 2 children, and between the job and the children, didn't have a lot of spare time. So went for a few years without writing, and then couldn't keep away from it. The idea, particularly the idea for getting and spending, kept forcing itself on me, and the only way to get rid of it was to sit down and write it. So I did. And I met my director, John Tillinger, through Marty Markinson, my producer. Marty found the script, contacted me. We talked on and off about it for a year or two while I was rewriting it and rewriting it.
Several years before it actually came that you had met the...
I'd met Marty in 1995, and he read the script, we talked about it for a year or two. Sometime in '96, he gave it to John Tillinger, who responded to it. We met for lunch. We didn't spill anything on each other or have any obvious problems, so I guess it was decided from that moment on that we would work together, and it's turned out to be a great blessing for me. He's a brilliant director and a play editor and dramaturg. We worked on the script for a while, and then it was arranged that it would be done at the Old Globe in San Diego this summer. We wanted to try it out far away from New York, and were successful in finding far away from New York. That was about as far as we could get. And saw it there, and Marty said, "We're going to do it in New York," and here we are.
Did Joey get the play to the Old Globe, or did you, or did your agent? How did it get out there?
Marty did, the producer,
I think,
sent it to them, and the story that I hear was that Jack O'Brien read it on the plane on the way back from directing The Little Foxes, and said, when he landed, called and said, "We'll do it."
Is there any tension between the law firm and your colleagues in the theater?
The only tension is that in the theater, when I'm in the theater, the people there, the actors, the cast, all they want to talk about is law. They want to, and the accountant want to ask me what's happening in the market, and then when I'm at work and with my clients, they only want to talk about the play. So I feel a little schizophrenic. But that's the only tension.
Have there been many changes made in your words as with the director feeling that it should go a different way or making a different feeling out of it?
Yes,
How do you react to that?
I think the play is where it should be, and luckily, I think we have the same vision for the play. But he encouraged me to take it in a certain direction that I did not initially do myself. The play, I find it hard to describe, so I just call it a play. Audiences laugh. It's a funny play, but it is not a comedy. And he directed, encouraged me to develop not the comic side of it, but the more serious side of it, which I did. And I think that's the right choice, and I think it works. And there are constant laughs that come in even at very tense or dramatic moments, which I think, at least to my, works well. So it's a combination of, it's been called a comedy, a courtroom drama, a morality play, a tragedy, every
Is
form.
that part of the director's role, to look at the whole and say, but I think it should go this way into being more dramatic or less funny or more sad if we...
I don't think I've ever said to anyone it should be less funny. More jokes. No, I think it's a combination of putting yourself in the place of an audience member and saying, I don't really understand can you tell me what you mean here or what you're going for here? And hear the playwright explain it and say, oh, well, I'm not getting that, maybe, you know. I try not to make suggestions. I've been lucky to work with really terrific people who I feel are smart enough to solve the problems. I'm just there as a sort of a sounding board. So, yeah, I don't think Terrence McNally is under no obligation to write the play that I think it should be. He has no obligation to write, my journey towards spirituality. It's his play. It's my job to interpret that, I think.
But you were an actor, so doesn't that influence the way you handle actors as a director?
I guess so. Yeah, hopefully, I think there are those who would disagree with me on this, but hopefully I have a sensitivity towards actors, having been there before. Again, I think my job is to tell the story. Is the story being told clearly? Is the audience following where we are? Is it entertaining?
I'm interested in directing comedians, and you're also a comedian yourself, of course, but I mean, you direct people who are funny on stage, and I was wondering, I get the impression that comedians come with their own style and their own reading. Is it more difficult to direct, or difficult to direct them if they're funny to begin with?
Oh, well, I've only done a little bit of directing. I've done more acting than directing. I don't actually know the answer.
You've been doing some dancing, too, I read. You even appeared as a dancer briefly.
Well, I think I said I tried to dance it. I was very thrilled to be in this musical, putting it together, which actually was Julie Andrews' return to the stage, frankly, before Victoria, like 2 years before. And it was all Sondheim songs, and I'm an enormous fan of Sondheim, and I was just thrilled out of my mind to be in it. And because I first got a call saying, would I be the narrator? And I said, well, yes, I would, although do tell them that if I got to sing, I'd like that even better, because I like to sing. And they said, oh, you do sing? And I said, oh, yes. So anyway, mostly it was a standstill musical, except the first day, it was Bob Avian was the choreographer, and they gave us this one dance step, and I saw Julie Andrews, Rachel York, and Michael Rupert get it like that. And Stephen Collins got it a little, and I got it not at all. I broke out into a cold sweat, and I never really did get it well. It was really nerve-wracking. I wish I were a better dancer, but I'm not.
You ever have to choreograph for people like that?
Yes, I'd love to.
Well, actually, the one number, Bob Avian was terribly sweet to me. I had a solo number, which was the song "You Could Drive a Person Crazy," and with Sondheim's permission, I changed it to "I Could Drive a Person Crazy," so it was about my character. And Bob said, having seen that I wasn't good at copying dance steps, he said, well, if you just were hyper and moved in rhythm to the music, what would you do? And so, and I remembered that because no one was in the room, and then they all had to come, and I had to sort of show it to them, and I just sort of, I just did my best, and at one moment I remember sort of just flinging myself across the floor right up to Julie Andrews, who looked so startled, and anyway, so they let me make up that choreography.
Very good, very good.
Hence your choreography.
Yes, exactly.
Know that secret.
What?
And that's our secret.
Did you let them just invent?
Choreographers, we do that a lot.
Well, except, you know,
Because-
Bob was so wonderful to do that
Yes.
because he actually saw that, and I don't know why, maybe if I rehearse for 6 months I get better following steps, but telling me just to do what came naturally
Yes.
was a really good way
But
to do
that
it
is,
fast.
that's the, I mean, it's not a secret, but that's, we do very much that.
You follow the body of the
Absolutely.
person. They,
Exactly. We have the dancers to put in the bodies of the dancers our style and our thought of motion or whatever. But when we deal with actors who actually are physical actors, all we do is encourage them to physicalize their character through motion. Not words, but just do it, how would that character move? And I find it absolutely wonderful because each one has his own style or his own interpretation of the character. I love doing that.
That's what I loved about Ragtime, that opening number when everyone sort of broke off individually, and you could tell some of them were dancers and some of them were. I thought it was so thrilling.
All I do is, you know, to me, everybody dances. Walking is dancing. Eating is dancing. Fighting is dancing. Making love is dancing. Everything is dancing. So if the actors seem to somehow be nervous that, you know, that they're too, the language is the words. But dance is another language to express the story, to tell the story and to express the character. So once they understand that, they liberate themselves. And I find that much more interesting, choreography in general, than whatever I can come up with. If you understand what I'm saying. Because it's like life in the street. Not two people walk the same. Not two people act the same. And that is what excites me.
so you don't choreograph in your imagination at home a whole sequence and imagine dancers doing it.
Well, yes. I mean, choreography for the musical theater is very much like directing. You do have a certain vision of what the tone, the language is, the style of it, and the structure. The one thing that I do the most in pre-production is structuring the numbers. This is what this number is about. Because usually on a script, in a musical, when it comes to the moment where people dance, where there are not words, all the writers do is dance break. And what you dance about, I mean, you know, it's in an opening like Ragtime, what are they going to be dancing about? This is about three tribes confronting each other. So the idea of confrontation and all that comes from pre-production. But specific steps, unless it is done for dancers, the motion, I'd rather go to the actor director, just like a director, and say, what is your character about? Where, are you an immigrant? Where are you coming from? Italy. Create a history. And then what are you doing here? Are you looking for your mother with a picture? Now walk and put it in a rhythm. Just walk, but show me how you... So it's really more like acting through motion, I guess, isn't it? I mean...
Well, now, do you come out of a tradition, as you say, you were in Argentina and then you worked in Paris. Is there, there is obviously a strong tradition in Latin America that you bring with it as growing up, which perhaps does not often happen in the United States. And did that influence you a lot?
Maybe, perhaps, yes. You mean about like social dancing and how
exactly.
physical we are?
Sure.
Yes, we are. We are very extremely, you know,
In Ragtime, for example, when did you come in and what directive were you giving? In a musical comedy, there are so many creative parts in it. There's the director, the music, and all of that. When does a choreographer come into this?
At the very beginning. I mean, in the real development of a musical, a choreographer is hand-to-hand with the director, because the choreographer is the one who is expressing, when the word stops, what the piece is about, and therefore it has to be a total marriage, a perfect marriage with the director. I find, as a matter of fact, it's more work, but I find it easier to do both, because one of the difficulties as a choreographer is that I have to serve the piece and the director's vision so that there is a total, there is no, that is seamless. And sometimes it's harder to guess what is in the director's mind. I mean, there are some directors that are extremely articulate and very clear, and some that are not, and some who don't know what they want. So therefore, it is a little harder to you know, to just do choreographer. But in a new piece, the choreographer should be from the very beginning. I mean, working with the writers, working with the director, everybody together. We can come up with an idea visually that might save 4 pages of, which is, of course, writers don't like, but...
Which is save.
I knew they were Garry, have you done any musical comedy at all?
No, not musical comedy as such, but I mean, I was just interested in what you were saying really earlier about, in fact, what you're doing is telling the story through how the people shape themselves on stage, and I think direction is exactly the same, really. I mean, once you actually pick the cast and begin the process of rehearsal, in a sense, it's a dual process is going on, because they're beginning to tell the story to you and you're beginning to tell it back to them. And that's, I think, how it evolves.
What does a playwright say to a director on the first meeting? What?
After hello.
Have you ever had anyone, a playwright, say to you, tell me what my play is about, so that I will know whether we're on the same wavelength?
It's never been quite that formal or that confrontational. Tell me what my play is about. It's very sort of fluid. I've been lucky.
You've been very lucky.
I've been very lucky to work. So it's been very fluid. It's just been sort of having lunch, or you can tell. I mean, if you go on a date with someone, a blind date, you can tell if it's working or if it's not working. It's a very similar kind of. It's chemistry. It's chemistry.
You had that with Joey too.
Yeah, I think that's right. You have to sense whether this person wants to invest his time, talent, and energy in this project, and that's what's important, the sense that there is that interest, that commitment. And so I don't know that there's any formula or any, but you gradually, maybe a couple of lunches, but it either is there and it works and it's lucky and it works for you, or it's not.
It's by what you choose to talk about, how you choose to talk about the play, how you see the play. It may even be actors that you have in common that you see in the play. You know, if I'm saying Mickey Rooney and he's saying George C. Scott, then we're not, we're not in sync.
You don't see the same play.
At odds.
Yeah. So it's everything. It's everything that you use in life.
We keep hearing the word in these seminars on the word trust. And I guess that's part of what you're saying, too, that you trust the instinct of the person, whether the director trusting the playwright or vice versa on it.
Well, now, Chris, you're in pre-production now, or you're just not in pre-production as such, but you're going
auditions.
through that, auditions, and you're going, I guess, today to look
late this afternoon.
So maybe
Tell
you
me.
can,
Tell me about it.
about the auditions and about the relationship to the director and what you're doing.
Well, the director is Nicholas Martin, who just did You Never Can Tell at the Roundabout and has done lots of plays at Williamstown. And I've heard very good things about him, but this is my first time working with him. And the play is called Betty's Summer Vacation. It's at Playwrights Horizons. We're presently in auditions. And I very much identified with what Joe just said, particularly when you got to, if you're thinking of some of the same actors, because I sometimes do find it hard to know, in that blind date aspect of it, how to evaluate how the play will filter through the particular director, and sometimes just connecting on an actor or actress gives you great sense of, oh, good. I remember actually with my play Beyond Therapy, which had been done off-Broadway with Sigourney Weaver, and Sigourney wasn't available anymore when it was now being done on Broadway, and the director was John Madden. He and I were talking about the play, and I said, do you know the actress Diane Wiest? And he said, oh, what a great idea. And she wasn't as, she hadn't won her 2 Oscars for the Woody Allen movies yet, she wasn't as famous, but I felt such comfort that he had such a, excited response to her. So, and then, I'm sorry, well, I once met the film director Robert Altman, who was going to make a movie version of Beyond Therapy, and he did, and I think it's terrible, I'm sorry to say. And he's a very charming person, and so and I was so excited he wanted to do it that 2 things happened. One is, in his charm, in a way I didn't really get what he was going to do. And then I also sort of heard what I wanted to hear, I think. And I do remember there was one moment where he did have what I thought in my gut was a truly bad idea, which he told me at the first meeting. It was that the two therapists should have their offices next to each other, which is okay. It's not in the play, but that's okay. But that they have this little alarm clock that goes off, and they suddenly run in and have sex together and then run out again. And the therapists are actually meant to be opposites and hostile to one another. It just made no sense. And I said rather politely, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Oh, don't worry, you know, we could film it so that if it didn't work, we just cut it out." Well, really, these are famous last words. I mean, then the minute I signed the contract, he wrote his own version, which wasn't contractually correct, but he was also the producer, and so, anyway, that was an unhappy experience. But in retrospect, I realized that I did hear that one clue and chose to not react to it.
That's the difference between theater and movies. And in the theater, you would not have signed the contract. In the theater, you also have the complete right. The author
Oh,
has.
yes, the difference in contract in theater is very significant. That in theater, the tradition
author has the
and
last word.
is that in the contract it says that you can't, no one can change your script without your approval.
Tell us about the audition process. Can you tell the moment the actor comes out? Does he have to read it all?
Well, you know, it's apologies to the actors present, but it is sort of true that, not immediately, no, but I would say in the first 12 lines, you can sort of hear.
It's tough.
Although, you know, maybe it's also my writing tends to be a little stylized, and it might be truer in my work than in some other people's, because it requires a very strange combination of genuine sincerity of believing what you mean. And I remember Joe Orton, the playwright, wrote this thing about acting tone where he said, "Please don't do an exaggerated acting tone. I've already exaggerated my material. Let my exaggeration stand and you find the reality underneath." And that's really true for me too. So that, for instance, I've written a terrible macho pig of a person named Buck who comes in and just is so sexually over the top and inappropriate. But I've noticed that the part will not work at all if the actor comes in and shows us that he thinks the character is a fool. So he's actually playing "I'm a fool," as opposed to the person who comes in and is just so happy to be there and is just flirting. And then let what I've written be the horrible part, but don't show me. So
I think that's so true, actually. So much of the line between acting what the character is and acting your opinion of the character is so thin sometimes. And it's not just for the actor, but for the director as well. It's one of the hardest things to get right. And I always think, I mean, essentially, the only real way you're going to be able to apprehend an actor and putting them together with the play is you actually see them on stage. And it doesn't matter that what you're thinking of them for is completely different to what you see. You then start to have some idea. Because what you're not employing is a set of talents or skills. That's a given. What you're employing is a personality, an attitude, a way of moving there, and it's the engagement of that person, the whole of that person, with the script and the role, which is what happens in the best acting.
Well, now, there is a tradition, and Michael, I can talk to you about this too, because you've gone through the auditions, you have the play, you know, in rehearsal and preview. Did you go to the auditions?
Yes.
Because there are some directors that don't want the playwright around. And secondly, there's an old tradition, as I say, that the actor was never to speak to the playwright. That the director was in the middle, and I don't know whether that was because they wanted to, "Hey, my part, can you give me a few more lines or something?" I don't know. Do you feel that? Have you talked to the actor? Anybody? Jump in, Joe.
Yeah, I have spoken to the actors on occasion. And
Good morning.
no, the first time I had not getting and spending the first play I had produced many years ago. I was not aware of the existence of this tradition and found myself talking to an actor, I thought in all innocence, until the director saw me and told me that we have not had any of that with getting and spending. It's a very free exchange, and it works very well. But I guess it's part of the relationship. You do have to find your way. I think it's also in the contract that the playwright has approval of cast as well. So
right.
It's another difference with the screenwriting and playwright. I don't want to sound like a lawyer, but I think it's. So I did go to the rehearsals or the auditions.
And did you give your opinion? Did you say, I don't think so?
Well, maybe I can tell a story and say why I've been a little reticent to do that. The first play I produced many years ago was in Chicago, and we had one role that we couldn't cast, and the director of the theater and the director said, we're going to take you to see a play over at another theater tonight. This play is ending this weekend. This actor is available. He's not the right age, not the right type, but he's a good actor. I went, saw the play. I thought he was terrific. I said, but he's not the right age, he's not the right... So I didn't take John Malkovich in the play. And so I've since then deferred to...
And before we return to these wonderful panelists, I would like to point out to you that the Wing is more than a sponsor of seminars and more than our famous Tony Awards, which is granted for excellence in the theater. We are an organization in whose year-round programs are dedicated to service in the theater and the community with the goal of developing new audiences. And to achieve that goal, we have created audience development programs for students like Introduction to Broadway, which began 7 years ago and has now enabled more than 70,000 New York City high school students to attend a Broadway show. And for many of them, for the very first time. And through our newest program, Theater in School, theater professionals like these in our seminars and the panels that we bring to you, they go directly into classrooms to work with and talk to students about working in the theater. In addition, we have our hospital program, which dates back to World War II and our legendary stage door canteen. Today's version of the program utilizes talent from Broadway, off-Broadway, and the cabaret world to entertain patients in nursing homes, veterans hospitals, children's wards, and AIDS centers. We are a year-round organization. We bring the magic of theater to those who cannot get to the theater itself. We are proud of the work we do and happy for that wonderful working relationship we have with the theatrical community. And we are grateful to everyone who makes what the American Theater Wing does possible. And now let's get back to our seminars on the playwright, director, and choreographer. I want to know what it is, George, that makes a playwright.
There was a wonderful critic who used to work with us, Edith Oliver at the New Yorker, who would say to a playwright, okay, once upon a time, what? And that's, to me, what makes a playwright, is to tell a story and in doing so, having something to say when they do it.
And something has to touch me. Something somewhere within that has to be a universal meaning, a truth that I can connect to. And it can be a story about outer space, or it could be a story about gorillas. It doesn't matter what the subject is. But somewhere in there, I have to have a little feeling that I felt, some emotional connection to it.
I wanted to know, can you really teach playwriting? And I want to say that about directing, too. Is it such a thing, or is it, or do you, as a teacher, shape what is already there?
I think the latter, because I went to Yale School of Drama and found it very valuable. I went, 20 years ago by now. But I don't feel that any of the arts can, quote, quote, be taught. But I do think it's valuable to get feedback, especially when you're in development and, frankly, later on, too. And so that's kind of what I view teaching to be, especially in terms of playwriting. It's a mentoring sort of thing. And that's the stuff I found useful when I was a student.
You belong to the Naked Angels group, and I was wondering if you're a part of a group, if that isn't a teaching experience as well.
I would say not so much Naked Angels, but for years I was a member of the company, the now defunct Circle Repertory Company, and that was really, really crucial in shaping, who I am today, because sort of ties into your question. I was not trained as a director, per se. But the training that I got was that Tanya Berezin once a season would let me direct a show on the main stage, and if it failed or if I fell on my face, I did show the next season. And I think that's the way you can the only real way that you can really learn. I mean, there are theories, there are certain tricks that you can learn. But until you get in front of an audience, until you're doing it, until it becomes practical, you don't know it, you don't get it inside of you. So that was really, really crucial in terms of my becoming a director, those years at Circle Rep.
So you never studied directing at the Yale Drama School or anything?
I did not.
You were an actor and then you evolved.
I trained as an actor at the North Carolina School of the Arts.
Uh-huh.
I did not go to drama school. I think the best teacher is the audience, and after we've rehearsed a play for weeks, it takes a number of performances in front of an audience, and you're always learning from the audience. I'm always learning from the audience. I've been rewriting things as recently as a few days ago. Not major, not new scenes, but you can always learn from the audience, and that's, I think maybe teaching and courses can help you accelerate that process, but I agree with Chris. I don't think you can teach or give someone something that isn't there, but you can help.
You know, let me throw in, because I agree how much you learn from the audience. I also found at drama school and at Juilliard too that as a writer you learn a great deal from the actors who then present it to the audience. And I found that when I was at Yale, I started to value some of the feedback I got from actors a little more than some of the feedback I got from other writers. Not that the writers weren't smart, but they sometimes came so much from their own point of view that an actor usually is coming from, how can I make this piece work? And so the feedback they give you is just very, very valuable.
Broadway and the theater is desperate for product, but I was wondering how hospitable you felt Broadway was to receiving new works.
Well, I may have mentioned at the beginning of this session that I haven't slept in 6 weeks, so that tells you how hospitable I feel. It's a daunting process. Friends ask me all the time, aren't you thrilled and delighted, and isn't it your lifelong fantasy? And I say, yes, but I'm also, terror swamps everything, I think. It's, and not just the terror of critics and being reviewed, but every night there are 400 or 500 critics in the audience, and the play has to speak to them and capture them, and that's a struggle, not an active, I don't sit there and do it, I just sit there and watch. It's the actors who have to do it, but it is, every night it starts all over again. Each performance is different. There are things one night that work completely perfectly and well, and the next night I said, well, didn't they hear it? What happened? So it's a daunting experience all around. And then when I look back on the series of chance occurrences and flukes that got me here, it's amazing to me that anything ever gets done at all. It's just amazing. I'm in constant awe of that.
Can you teach choreography? Look, I think that one can teach, it's like life. You can have information. You can give information. I can give information to somebody, the formulas. There are certain formulas. But until you live, until you've experienced something you do not know, knowledge comes to me from just going out there and doing it, like Joe says. You know, do it, fail, succeed. Even the failure and success is relative. It's the doing, it's the process. That's learning. I didn't have any academic, knowledge in choreography at all. I just learned through, as a dancer and working
but you worked with Jack Cole, and what did you learn from and Michael Bennett, too?
Yes, but that's not choreography, you see. I mean, that's really, what choreography is it's like writing. It's very close to writing. You have a piece of music and you have an idea, and then you have to paint and design and write in the space, and it's very ephemeral. So I would say yes, there are ways of teaching the formulas, yes, but the choreographer has to go out and do it himself or herself.
I think actually a director probably, me as a director, certainly learn more from the failures than the successes.
I agree.
Because the successes you say, thank God, and don't think about it. And the failures you're forced to reflect on.
Exactly.
What is it that went wrong there?
That's good to know.
But the strange thing about it is that you can't, when you have a failure or something that's, say, not successful, there's no formula that you can't sort of avoid it. The next time you can't. It never becomes. You're never working towards a sure thing. It's constantly case to case, just so different.
Yeah, but you can't see kind of a general sort of.
Yes.
You are forced to think about what the process was, how it came to be, what's there, and that just the asking of that, I think, certainly it helps me sort of move on. But it's absolutely true. You can't. You end up on the first night, and when you. I mean, it's always the situation is you go into something, there's a terrific script, you've got a terrific cast, everything is right, and the thing just sits down on the floor and dies. You go in and you say, I shouldn't be doing this, I don't have the proper blah, 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 and
But it's always like that, I think.
Yes.
You're constantly surprised in the rehearsal room, the stuff that works in the rehearsal room that's just, you think like, I am a genius.
Yeah.
It gets in front of an audience and the stuff that you just can't figure out, and it gets in front of an audience and it hits the air and it takes off. And there is that element all the time, which I think is it's thrilling, but it's also extremely frustrating.
Nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Well, there was an old English teacher of writing called Sir Arthur Quiller Couch that nobody reads anymore, but he wrote about writing. He said, murder your darlings. When you think something is so good, watch out, because it's going to come up and bite you in the wrong way.
You mentioned something that hadn't been said before, that they're the audience or the critics. And each night there are 400 or 500, whatever it is, of critics in the audience. And each night's reaction is different. In the early stages, which ones do you listen to? Which night, which critics is telling you something that will change, reinstate, or whatever it is, as you as a playwright?
It's a good question, because we have this discussion. We say, well, is it our fault, or was this just a bad audience, or was this, was it their fault? Were they sleeping, or whatever? We had a problem last night with the performance. One of the headsets that someone was wearing started getting the Yankee game at the beginning of the play, and the first line in the play is calculated to, and every performance I've ever seen until last night does, get a nice laugh, and it tells the audience they can laugh, and it didn't last night, and I was in the back of the balcony, and I went downstairs, and they told me what had happened, and I thought, oh, okay, I really didn't hear it. But we have that discussion all the time about, and how many audiences does it take to get the message? Sometimes one, right away, it's not you, or it's not them, it's you, and you change it. But it's always a delicate thing, and talk about murdering your darlings there. I know you have to, it's very difficult to do it, but you do it. And you have to do it, and the audience tells you when to do it, and it's an ongoing process of learning from them.
It's also interesting, I think, that, as an actor, I was in a play once that during the 3 weeks of previews was what we thought was a complete disaster. The audience was just bored. A review came out in the New York Times that said, this is the most fantastic thing, and from that moment on to the end of the run. Right. No, and I'm not saying, I don't know if there is such a thing as the power of the New York Times, or if it's just it freed people up to, someone said it's okay to laugh, or it's okay to. There is that phenomenon that happens occasionally with plays. I've seen it before, that once people write about it, or once an opinion starts to form, even if an opinion is all over the map, then I think the show organically becomes whatever it's going to become.
We're going to questions now, and I'm sure that there'll never be enough time to ask all the questions to take advantage of this wonderful panel, but I'm going to try. So would you please ask your first question?
Hi, my name's Brietta, and I'm a theater student at NYU. And my question is, after the initial meeting, can you describe the collaboration between the writer and the director?
I'm sure it's different every time, and even with the same writer and director would be different on different plays, but once you agree and come to terms that you have made a mutual commitment and you want to work and realize this project, I think it becomes very important to see that you're working on the same play and that you have the same vision. And I think that there's a fair amount of attention and energy has to go into that process of I have worked with directors who, it turns out, sometime down the road, we realize we aren't reading or seeing the same play, and so that's a major part of the process to come to terms with in the very early days after the first meeting.
Joe, would you like to answer that too? What is the initial process? What starts?
I think of it as, for me, it's a lot of it is about gathering information. I love to have the playwright in rehearsal. I love to spend time with the playwright. What music were you listening to when you wrote this? What is there an artist? You know, what does it look like in your head? How did you see it? Not that I'm going to try to replicate that, but any information that the writer can give me about what made them create it, why they created it, things they saw, they smelled, events. It helps me to sort of interpret through me what ultimately what the evening is going to be.
And you never know how that may come back to help weeks later.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's been said earlier as well. I mean, it's sort of a human relationship like many others. Some writers are very good friends, and the relationship goes far beyond the actual professional relations. Others are less so. But one way or the other, you are two people thrown together in the middle of a very intense process. And I mean, as you say, I remember a particular play called Whistle in the Dark, written by Tom Murphy, an Irish writer. And he told me, I did actually a revival of the play 20 years after it was written. And he told me that when he was writing it, he was 26, and he was so angry about what he was writing that he characterized it as the powder was coming off his teeth as he gritted them together. And I have never, ever forgotten that throughout the entire course of rehearsal. I do think that one difference is, though, I think that the writer does need to leave the rehearsal room at a particular time. It doesn't matter for how long, but at some point they do, because I think what can happen is that they can tend to see the play too much from the point of view of the production and to become involved in the production's problems or difficulties or whatever. And I think to be able to leave and come back, they're able in some ways to give a better judgment and in a sense to hold the production accountable to what they originally wrote.
And may I add something too, because I think for me it's very important, in that pre-production time of the work between the director and the playwright. There are many things sometimes that we directors we do not agree with. I feel that instead of keep on fighting them, I feel it's as a director and a choreographer, is my duty as an interpreter, because I'm not the creator, I'm the interpreter, to put it up on the feet and show it to the writer. Hopefully the actors, when this, when it is fleshed out, then hopefully the writer will be able to see and understand what I've been trying to tell him intellectually, and I have been able to show him. So I think that it's something that we have to do. That it gets to a certain point that the writer has to be served. That's my feeling. I have great humility for whoever invented that.
Yeah, I hate hearing the words, well, let's show you the scene the way you've written it.
Are you think we do it on purpose?
Would you like to your question?
Hi, my name is Don Fabraio, and I'm also a student, theater student at NYU. And my question is it very hard to make the transition from being a performer or an actor into being a director or a playwright?
Joe, that sounds
That's you.
It's an easy no. It was not. I mean, I think it's more about temperament. I mean, if you sort of have a sort of very controlling person, it's very easy to make the. No, it wasn't.
How about from a performer to a playwright, or playwright to a performer, other than not sitting on the or not questioning sitting on the floor?
Well, I remember when I was growing up, I was very impressed that Noel Coward, who my mother loved his plays, and I read them, and I saw that he, had acted in many of his own plays. So I feel that there are lots of people who are drawn to theater who are drawn to all aspects of it, and Harold Pinter also started as an actor. I think that being an actor inside a play can teach you good things about writing as well. And I know, again, when I was at Yale, to my surprise, I ended up doing acting because I was in the playwriting department. And sometimes I was in my own plays, but sometimes I was in other people's plays, and being in with the other actors, struggling how to make it work from moment to moment, taught me a great deal. So I think it can be useful and not hard, actually.
Thank you. Your question.
Hi, my name is Vicki Bennett, and my question is basically for Garry Hynes and Joe Mantello. Actors are very vulnerable when they're working on a piece, and they need to feel safe while they're working. How do you create that trust with your acting company?
I think it's not something I would think of specifically, how do I do that, or how will I do that, but I think it's to do what I want for myself, because as a director, I'm vulnerable too, in a sense, and that is to create a rehearsal room, which is a place where people can relax and can work and can talk about things that are difficult and do things that are difficult. So it's very much for me about the rehearsal room and the set of relationships and the warmth. I mean, if I'm not having fun in a rehearsal room, there's something terribly wrong, and I can't really function. And I sort of think, I think that goes for everybody else as well. So it starts in there and continues in the pub.
Thank you so much. And once again, I find myself saying there's not enough time. And there never is, but I am indeed grateful for the time that we have to be able to have the talent that we have on this panel today. And it's the American Theater Wing seminars on working in the theater that are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. Today's panel, the seminar, has been on the playwright, director, and choreographer. And I think it tells the whole story of theater, because you have the word, and then you have the people that made it work, and that brings us all to the theater, that makes the theater so alive, and that there is nothing else like it but live theater. And so, from someone who adores the theater, thank you so very, very much for being here.